Welcome back to We Huddle podcast. Now, this is a podcast. We just did a YouTube video. I just had to remind myself it was a podcast. We are your hosts. My name is Owen, and I'm back here with Tabor. Just like the good old days, a whole 3 years ago. When it turns to May, it'll be 3 years that we started this, which we were talking about in prior to last video. That's insane. It's been that long.
Yeah. Crazy.
This whole thing, I think the first episode was talking about predicting the Bills roster following the 2020 draft, and now we're going into 2023 draft making content for it and stuff. So that is wild. But today I have made a what I would do mock draft. I was just going to talk about it, but I had Christian here from the last video, which no, it's totally a different day. We have different shirts on and everything. It's
yeah,
totally
you can tell it's literally like tomorrow. So
right. Nothing else has changed other than the fact our shirts have changed. But I was just going to record this by myself, but I still had Christian here, so I was like, screw it. Let's see what his opinion is of my mock draft. So I have sent it over to you. You have not looked at it yet, and go ahead and lay eyes on it for the first time. There are 2 trades in it, in this one. And how we're going to do this is as Christian's reading it, I'll discuss how we're going to talk about this. Christian's going to read it. He's going to find a couple picks or a handful of picks that he wants to actually talk about and hear my explanation for. I'm assuming both of them are going to have to do with the trades themselves because those are usually the bigger picks, as well as probably the Bills pick, to be honest with you. However, I think there's going to be a couple other ones that are pretty interesting in there that aren't typical of normal mock drafts, which probably isn't what's going to really happen, but it is what my opinion is. And we're going to have Christian go through, find his picks you want to talk about. We'll get through every single pick we do, but we'll stop and talk about and have an extended conversation on the ones that you find interesting. All right. Have you found the first one you would wish to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, we can start with the trade. I feel like, Bryce Young at 1, Will Anderson at 2. Expected. Take me through this first trade that you got.
Okay, so the trade it's going to be Las Vegas moving up from 7 to 3. I've already forgotten the numbers I've written down. I think it's so Las Vegas gives up 7, 101, which is their second third round pick, a 2021 first, and a 2024 first, 2024 fourth round pick, all for 3. I think, and when I was doing it on the mock draft machine on TDN, I also did a pick swap in the 6th round, so the Cardinals will move up in the 6th round just to sweeten it extra if they didn't accept it. But that is the bare bones of the trade. I feel like that's enough compensation to move up 4 spots into the top 3, especially for a quarterback. And the pick is Will Levis, quarterback out of Kentucky. Will Levis is graded equally as my number 1 quarterback with Bryce Young. I think they're the same grade, but entirely 2 different players, do 2 different things differently as well. I think Levis is a better athlete out of the pocket, can make things work out of structure. And Levis specifically wasn't helped all this much this year. Not saying Bryce was, because he didn't have the typical Alabama receiving core that we've seen in the past. However, Levis lost Wan'Dale Robinson, and Chris Rodriguez was suspended. He lost 3 of his starting offensive linemen to the NFL. He lost his offensive coordinator to a different job. I think it was a head coaching job in college football. So he had a brand new offensive coordinator who was not good, and basically no NFL talent on the roster that he played against. He played against other SEC. He's in the SEC, so it's playing against Georgia and Tennessee and South Carolina and all these other schools. So he did not perform the best. I think he played a little too much hero ball. But I think the Raiders coming up and drafting him, not only are they good with drafting these psychopaths who do crazy shit like put mayo in their coffee and eat a banana, but at the same time, I think having Garoppolo in place, if you think Levis is a little bit ways away from being that starting quarterback, I think having Garoppolo on that bridge deal helps you stomach that, and Garoppolo is shown to be able to mentor young quarterbacks like he did in San Francisco on 2 different occasions with Trey Lance and Brock Purdy. So getting a guy in for Josh McDaniels, and I think if Will Levis goes from having no offensive coordinator in Kentucky and no NFL talent to throwing to Devontae Adams with Josh McDaniels calling the plays and having Josh Jacobs in the backfield, there's going to be such a big increase. It could be, I don't want to say Justin Herbert levels because he's not as good as Justin Herbert, but he'll definitely have a jump in what people were expecting from. And I think he's just not getting talked about in the top 5 just because Twitter specifically hates him.
All right. That's very fair. Looking at this, nothing else is too striking in the top 5. I can understand Tyree Wilson to the Seahawks. I get Christian Gonzalez to Detroit. Jalen Carter to the Cardinals. You don't think they're gonna look at some of the questionable character and be like, maybe something else?
I think they were planning on taking him at 3, and they probably still would take him at 3 just because he's that good. He's my number 1 player overall, and he's just that freaking good. But the fact that he has those red flags, they'll be like, oh, look, we traded back to 7, and no, we'll take the guy, and he's still going to be the best player in this draft class all around. And I mean, that gives them plausible deniability for drafting him because he fell, as well as they lost J.J. Watt and Zach Allen, so they lost both their 5-tech defensive ends. And even if they switch up defensive schemes, they lost Jordan Phillips last year. They didn't have him, and they just weren't a good defense in general. So adding like an actual absolute shit wrecker on the defensive line is probably going to be better than anything else they could probably do at 7 there, even with the red flags.
Okay, all right. The one that I was curious about, not necessarily because I disagree with the pick, but just because I think that there's so many things that they can do. Pick number 8 with the Falcons. I feel like there's a lot of different ways that they could go with this pick. And you had them going with Cam Smith. I would be curious what your thought process was there.
Oh yeah, real quick before we continue, because we talked about 3. Can you just go from 4 up until 8? Just because I forgot who I put it for this.
Yes. So CJ Stroud was at 4.
Okay.
You have Tyree Wilson at 5 going to the Seahawks. You have Christian Gonzalez going at pick number 6 to Detroit. You have Jalen Carter going number 7 to Arizona. Cam Smith going at pick number 8 to the Falcons.
Yeah, so personally, and I haven't come off of this, I've dropped him down a little bit grade-wise, but he still is tied for my number 1 corner in the draft class, which is a very hot take, and not nobody else I have found shares my opinion. I was high on him when I first watched him beginning of the season. I was like, well, okay, everyone's telling me that he's not the number 1 corner. Let me go watch some of the stuff later in the season. I dropped him a couple points because I felt like he fell off a little bit in certain areas, but I still feel like he's one of the top corners in the draft class, and he's tied with Devon Witherspoon as my number 1 corner. Actually, no, he's tied with Christian Gonzalez for my number 1 corner grade, and Devon Witherspoon is like half a point or a point below both of them. So I was fine with going any of them. I just think Cam Smith, being from South Carolina, it's close to Georgia, and I just didn't want to see him slide too much further, especially because how high I am on him. He's a good zone corner. The question mark with him was that man coverage. He just didn't seem that fast, and he ran a good 40 times, so I feel like that quenches that a little bit. And he's just solid. He's like he's good to great at a lot of things, but he's not elite at any one thing. Maybe just with the understanding of how to use his length and the leverage, so like he could be in zone coverage. And even though he's not right on the guy, he knows, okay, if he throws the ball to this out route, how many yards away from the out route can I be standing that I'll still be able to get a hand on it without actually being there, and he'll be able to bait passes in zone coverage by doing so. So I think he's capable of running man coverage. The question mark there was long speed. Kind of answered at the combine, and even then, you just brought in a couple good safeties for in the Falcons, who just brought in, I think, Jesse Bates they brought in 2 safeties in the free agency. I can't remember who they were specifically, but they still have a need a corner opposite AJ Terrell, and I think this would be the answer. And like I said, it's what I would do in mock draft. He's my next highest graded corner outside of Christian Gonzalez.
Very fair. The next 2 picks I think are probably pretty safe. Peter, I'm going to butcher his last name again. Say it.
No, I want to hear you try this because I saved you last video. I want you.
Peter Skoronsky?
Oh yeah, you got it right.
All right, cool. I'm like, for some reason, really bad with like the skis. All the skis, I just can't do.
You're talking to a Pollock here, okay? Watch yourself.
Yeah, I am, and I'm from Buffalo, right. So it's weird. But you
think you'd be good? I don't know.
You'd think. And Devin Witherspoon at 10 to the Eagles doesn't surprise me either. But next up, we have a trade with the Detroit Lions. Do you want to highlight your trade between Detroit and Tennessee?
Yeah, so Tennessee is going to move back to 18 from 11. With Skoronsky gone, I'm not over the moon about any of these other offensive tackles. Broderick Jones is talked about a lot as a first-round guy. I have him as a second-rounder because I just think he's super athletic, but he's really raw, as well as I have Paris Johnson graded as a first, but it's kind of more of a late first, and I don't really think the Titans want to reach on a tackle there, and they'll just pick up the extra capital and try to fill out their team, which has a lot more holes on it now that they've gone through and gutted it and cut a bunch of guys, and they can just fall back to 18, try to find the next best available player. and hopefully find their answer at tackle, whether it's in the free agent market. They brought in Andre Dillard. They have a couple guys that are kind of stopgap options. So it wasn't like a pressing need, but like I'd rather just take a developmental upside guy later on and then force a pick there. So they're going to get the 18th overall pick, the Detroit Lions 2024 third round pick, and I believe a 6th round pick in the current year. I think it's 196, 198, something like that.
194.
194. Yeah, so it's gonna be a 6th round pick. So they get a first and a 6th this year and a 4th next year to move back 7 spots in a class where they don't really have any of the top needs are right there. Plus the one need they probably could need would be edge, and there's plenty of them elsewhere. So I felt like they were a good spot to move down at. And Detroit moved up to take Anthony Richardson. The slide stops at 11. I think the Detroit, they haven't put out an extension to Jared Goff yet. And with the fact that they want to play, hard-nosed running football and play good defense, Anthony Richardson isn't going to start right away. They still have Goff under contract, and the fact that they're not extending him yet makes me think they want to move off of him sooner rather than later. So they can bring Richardson in, have him sit on the bench for 1 year until Goff's contract's up, and then they can move Richardson into the starting lineup, really take advantage of that dual threatness, and allow him to work with probably the best receiving core he's had since probably high school. If his high school is even good, I don't even know that far back. I just know Florida's wasn't fantastic, and now he's going to have Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams when he's back from his gambling suspension, which he'll be in a year from now, so he'll definitely be back. And he'll have pieces around him, and then they'll be able to utilize that dual threatness with their high defensive IQ, or defensive capabilities, especially after taking Christian Gonzalez at 6.
All right. Well, that's Anthony Richardson at 11. Next up, Texans solidify their O-line a little bit with Paris Johnson at 12. Brian Branch at 13 for the Jets. My question here is, you see Brian Branch being that, I guess, having that high of a grade for certain NFL teams, and especially for the Jets, who seem to have a knack for finding rookies nowadays. So you see them being like, you know what, Brian Branch, he's going to be our next defensive rookie of the year. He's going to be that guy, live up to Sauce Gardner's shoes, maybe. You think that's going to be? Yeah,
they have both their outside corners figured out right now, and the safeties were a question mark. And even if the guys they brought in to be like kind of stopgap options can prove to be starters and win right out of camp, because they'll probably have the go ahead to be like, okay, you're our entrenched starters. Their job is to then lose it in camp. If neither of them do bad enough to lose it in camp or preseason, you can always play Brian Branch at slot corner. It's what he played at Alabama. People are just more projecting him to be more of a split safety, which I think would fit well with what the defense in New York does, which is run split safeties with outside corners. I really think if he doesn't win the safety job, he'll at least get a starting job as a slot corner, and so he'll find a way on that Jets defense. And he's a pretty good player. He's probably the only safety, good like top end safety you can get in this class. And with the Jets being one of the teams that have one of the only teams that have a glaring need at safety, I think they should go out there and get the only one that's really worth filling a plug-and-play starter role and not try to gamble on some guys later on in the draft.
Okay. Next, there's Miles Murphy going to the Patriots, solidifying maybe that D-line a little bit. You have JSN going to the Packers, which I've seen mocked a couple of times. Respectable. Same with Deontay Banks going to Washington. You also have Joey Porter Jr. going to the Steelers. And then after that, you have DeJuan Jones going to Tennessee. You believe that DeJuan Jones is going to be their guy? That's going to be the guy that they think is going to solidify that O-line?
DeJuan Jones, I have graded slightly higher than Broderick Jones just because he's more of a finished product now, whereas Broderick Jones, I think, is going to be that left tackle who has the potential to grow into something better. And DeJuan Jones is just a monster. He's like 6'8", has absolute hammers for hands. And if you're going to keep trying to run your offense through Derrick Henry, having that guy block for him, whether it's at right tackle and moving Dylan Raduns, I think, is back at right tackle for them right now. They're just going to want to beef up the offensive line somewhat if they're going to want to run their offense through Derrick Henry. And even though DeJuan Jones, for me, is like an early second-round grade, I trust him to fit into Tennessee's scheme more than anybody. And he's worth the risk, the reach here, as opposed to at 18, as opposed to reaching for him at 11 or reaching for a guy like Paris Johnson or Broderick Jones, who maybe isn't as good of a scheme fit as DeJuan Jones is. And it probably aren't. Paris Johnson more than what was his name? Not DeJuan Jones, the other Jones. Broderick Jones. There's so many Joneses. Keeping up with the Joneses here. but Broderick Jones is not a finished product, and Paris Johnson isn't really someone I think would fit into their system as well as DeJuan Jones does. So moving down and still getting DeJuan Jones is probably their best case scenario when it comes to getting more draft capital to fill out that roster and still addressing their offensive tackle need.
All right. So we left off with DeJuan Jones, pick number 18. Next up, we have B. John Robinson going 19 to Tampa Bay. We're going to have a little run of picks that I want you to explain, because this one and the next one I'm curious about. But this one, Tampa Bay decides to go running back here. You think that they don't pass up on the talent that is Bijan instead of going for maybe a position that might have a bigger need?
Yeah, do me a favor, while we're talking about this, go look up who their starting running back is projected to be on our lads. But from what even then, I don't know. I don't think they have a running back that would prevent me from drafting Bijan Robinson. Their starting quarterback is Baker Mayfield. Their biggest need is cornerback, and there's been a run on 5 of them already up to this point in the draft. So they've missed out on the top guys, or at least the first round worthy guys. And I think that they did the best when they were able to establish a run game, even when Brady was there. Baker worked best when they established a run game in Cleveland between Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. So they need an identity on that offense. They weren't able to run the ball at all last year. So you bring in a guy like Bijan who's going to be able to create offense even without like elite blocking or a good complementary passing attack, and it establishes that kind of offensive identity that they're going to need, especially with a bridge quarterback like Baker is, who only ever really succeeded when he had that strong running game. So I think overall, he's the best player available at the moment at 19. Obviously, he's going to be the best player available at 19. And the fact that they really need just to find some kind of identity on that offense with now a changeover at quarterback and so much turnover from the Super Bowl winning year, they're going to need something to right the ship. And having just a great running game might win that division anyway. So they could just, I think it's the safest pick. And it's what, even if they, I don't, like I said, I know they have Rachaad White, but other than that, I don't know what they have at running back. So that might just be, they have Rachaad White as their guy to take pitch count for him and then just run Bijan for like 400 carries or 400 touches next year, and hopefully he can just carry them to like 7-8 wins.
Yeah. For context, Rachaad White is projected to be running back number 1 with Chase Edmonds behind him.
Oh yeah, so I'm definitely in favor of that pick, even more so now. And I like Rachaad White. I like Rachaad White, but I don't think he's a lead back.
That's fair,
especially not for Baker Mayfield lead like team.
Right. And then the next one I have, again, not because I necessarily disagree with the pick. This is the Seattle Seahawks, which you have going with Mazi Smith, interior D lineman. I was just curious as to where you saw kind of the talent that was still there and how you saw, like, well, maybe they have needs at like corner or like guard or like tight end maybe, but you know, the D lineman is definitely the move here. I was interested in your thought process.
With who was left, I was looking at wide receiver because they have D. Eskridge as their slot, but I was a bit of a fan of D, so I'm hoping that he can really turn that around a little bit. Maybe in this year he can stay healthy. Their whole line has actually come together pretty well, and last year they found Tariq Woolen, but they also got Kobe Bryant from Cincinnati. So they have a decent second corner, and I'm not too worried about that. Plus, like I said, with the Tampa Bay pick, who has an even bigger needed corner than even Seattle does, 5 corners are already off the board by the time pick 20 comes up. So you just really look at what can we continue to bolster, and their D line has not been kind of this like staple for them in a long time. And even last year, it kind of struggled, and they're going to be going up against their number one team. They're going to be facing off against and trying to beat in their division is San Francisco, who likes to run the football. And Mazi Smith is an absolute fridge at nose tackle. He's a big, beefy boy in all the right ways. He's not like a big, fat nose tackle that just eats up blocks. He is built like the incredible bulk. You have to double team him, or he literally just throws your center back into your lap. So as a team who's going to be going against another team in their own division and trying to win that division, who is going to be having a not really mobile quarterback in Brock Purdy as their starter. They're going to be relying on their running game a lot. If you can get a guy who goes in there and absolutely dominates the line of scrimmage and allows for your other first round pick, Tyree Wilson, to get one-on-one blocks, especially if he reduces down inside and rushes from the interior, it'll also free up lanes for Jordan Brooks, who is a tackle machine, and Bobby Wagner, who's back again. So it just overall helps that defense in the up front area, and it helps play into trying to compete against San Francisco. And their offense really, because tight end, they have Noah Fant, they have Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. Geno has weapons. He has Kenneth Walker coming back. And so the only thing they really need there is a slot receiver, which I think they can target later on in like the second or third round.
That's fair. Obviously, pick 21 is void. Kalijah Kansev. I can't tell if. Okay, the bottom part of the Y is cut off for whatever reason. Interior D lineman going to the Chargers at 22. Jordan Addison going to Baltimore at 23. Quentin Johnson going to the Vikings at 24. Broderick Jones at 25 to the Jaguars. And then the next one that I wanted to talk about was the Giants taking Cody Mauch at 26, interior offensive lineman. Again, something that I feel like the Giants could go a couple of different ways. I do think that bulking up their O line should be a priority, but on a team where okay, maybe you could see either a wide receiver perhaps or a cornerback. Why do you think that they see the value enough in Cody to decide, what, we want to go O-line early and wait on the other positions?
Yeah, so the only other position I'd really consider taking for them would have been wide receiver, but I'm not a big Zay Flowers guy, so the only three guys I have as a first-round pick a run went on, and they are all gone by the time they get to the Giants, so they just got Darren Waller in. I think they'll be able to funnel their passing offense through him, and some of the other guys that are already there kind of holdovers. They're not any number one types, but if you can, they've had a need at interior offensive line for forever. They had John Feliciano as their starting center for the past 2 seasons, or past season since Dable took over. Mock, I think, is getting slept on a little bit. He really showed at the Senior Bowl that he can hang with guys from the Big Ten and SEC, being a guy from North Dakota State, even smaller. And he played tackle in college. He switched into guard at the Senior Bowl and played very well, and I think that's where he was going to project to. But he also started learning how to take snaps while he was at the Senior Bowl to really expand that. So he can really be plug and play anywhere you want him to be. If I was higher on John Michael Schmitz, this would have been the pick. And in my predicted mock draft that'll be coming out, I'll spoil that one. This pick is John Michael Schmitz because that's kind of like the consensus where he's probably going to go ever since the Senior Bowl. It's been like the Giants would have him. You might as well put him in Penn there. So I think Cody Mauch's a better player than Schmitz right now. He's more well-balanced and has a higher ceiling. So I'm fixing that interior offensive line to really help out Saquon and really have that offense run through Saquon and hoping that I can grab one of these other second-tier wide receivers and maybe even third-tier wide receivers in the second or third round.
Yep. After that, you have Lucas Van Ness going to the Cowboys. You have Drew Sanders going to the Bills. And I feel like given the way that the board is going, this pick seems pretty fair. The only other picks that I might see are maybe a Zay Flowers, but you're not high on Zay Flowers. Maybe maybe on offensive line, but I don't really think so. I guess my question here is why stay and pick Drew instead of maybe trading back and going with something else in maybe the late first or early second.
I was thinking about it, but this I know it's not predicted. This is what I would do. And Brandon Beane has never traded back in his career. And I looked at the board and I was like, okay, we have this glaring need at linebacker. And I'm a big fan of Dion Henley, but I don't think he's going to be the Mike linebacker that's going to fit for our defense. I think he can be a Mike linebacker in some defenses, but for the Bills defense, I don't see him fitting in that role. I felt like they really needed that bigger guy who can really help beef up the run defense in the middle. That was kind of their biggest weakness. So it really was between Drew Sanders, who I have as a borderline 1-2. He's a high second for me, basically a first-round pick grade, and Jack Campbell, who I have as a 2-3. So I really think Drew Sanders has a lot more to go. I think he'll be bumpy in his rookie year because he's a converted edge rusher. He only played 1 year as a stack linebacker, so his tackling form isn't great, and his IQ and pass coverage isn't that great. But he's 6'5", 250, is really athletic. Since he played edge rusher, he knows how to rush the quarterback. He knows how to set the edge. He knows how to stack and shed on blockers. The only thing holding him back is that his first few years in the league are going to be a bit rocky, teaching him, coaching him up how to tackle and how to be a better zone player in coverage. Whereas Jack Campbell has just those physical limitations to the point where, yeah, he's the same size and can do the same things in the running game, probably even a little bit better, but he has no real upside when it comes to learning how to be a pass coverage guy or rushing the passer. I think both those things are total non-starters with him. So going with a guy like Drew Sanders, who's basically discount Tremaine Edmonds, and you just lost Tremaine Edmonds, except he's a little bit more further along than Tremaine was when he came out as a rookie. I think you go with this pick, and even though he's not a first-round evaluation, you get your first pick of the linebackers. You don't have to wait and see and make sure no one takes your guy before it gets to you again. And you just make sure that one glaring hole, because the Bills are solid everywhere else besides one spot, and that's going to be linebacker, starting linebacker, that is. Everywhere else in the starting lineup is set going into the season. It's just going to be who is going to be the starting middle linebacker. Is it going to be A.J. Klein? Is it going to be Terrell Bernard? I'd rather take Sanders and let him be the Mike and really work that out. And even though it's the grade isn't there, the need and not wanting to lose out on getting Sanders was probably what drove me to stay and make that pick.
Okay. I have two more questions about your mock. The first one is kind of, I guess, like a two-parter-ish, more so pertaining to the Saints. So your next two picks are tight end. You have the Bengals drafting Dalton. Is it Kincaid or Kincaid? Kincaid. You have Bengals drafting Dalton Kincaid, and then Michael Mayer going to the Saints at 30. How much of this Saints pick is based off of circumstance, based off of the entire board, and also, like, are they drafting Kincaid if the Bengals go in a different direction, or are they sticking with Mayer as their guy?
I think that's I have Kincaid graded higher, and I think they would have taken either of them if they were there. But if they were both there, I probably would have went with Kincaid, because they have no one at tight end. Like, Taysom Hill is probably still, it's Adam Troutman or Taysom Hill at tight end for them right now, and I'm not excited for either of those things. So I wanted them to pick one of these guys here, and then that way they can move on from Taysom Hill's contract. They won't have to repay Troutman, who's a free agent after either this year or the next season. So they can get a guy who's an actual difference maker, and they can put more emphasis on the Kamara running game with an additional helping there. Which is why I was hesitant to say Kincaid. Kincaid is more of that Darren Waller type, which Derek Carr played with. So he might be the pick because of that. Or they might want to go with Mayer because he is more of that run blocking type of tight end, where Kincaid's more of a Darren Waller or Travis Kelce type, where he's basically a supersized wide receiver. Mayer is more of that all-around, baby Gronkowski kind of build, where he's thicker, can move guys in the run game, and help contribute and help open up Kamara with an extra blocker there. So they provide different things, and I can see the Saints want to go with either of them. It was just so happened that I felt that the Bengals' tight end room was so weak that they were going to take one of the guys as well, and they were going to value a guy like Kincaid over Mayer, unlike the Saints, who would have been happy to take either or. So I felt Kincaid was the obvious choice there for the Bengals, and then when Mayer still being there and being the best player available, filling a position of need, and hopefully helping them get out of cap hell further down the road with Taysom Hill's contract, and et cetera, and also helping out with opening up Kamara's running lanes, it just made the most sense for Mayer to be there, despite tight end not being like a absolute high value position. It was just something that I felt could add to their offense to try to just win that division, get another weapon in there for Carr.
Okay. And then at pick 31, you have Henley going to the Eagles. And then my final question is Jahmyr Gibbs going to the Kansas City Chiefs. They draft a running back. That running back is Jahmyr Gibbs. But the Chiefs also do have Isaiah, I want to crack the earth every time my foot lands on the ground, Pacheco, at running back right now. Do you see this as just like a complimentary 1-2 punch? This is what's going to help keep this Chiefs team relevant as we get into the further years? Is this is what we see as our best player available? We don't really have to draft for need. We don't really have to draft for a position. Is it kind of a mixture of everything? What is going on with this pick specifically?
So the Chiefs' needs were probably wide receiver, which I thought Zay Flowers here, but then I was like, nah. I have someone graded higher than him. I might as well take him. And also off the tackle, which I didn't really want to take Darnell right here. I like him, but I don't think he's going to be a back half of the first round kind of guy. So with Gibbs, he is that we just talked about him, Kamara, Alvin Kamara or Christian McCaffrey type, where even if he's not the one in the backfield taking the handoff, he'll flex out to the slot and still be on the field. So he kind of fulfills that wide receiver hole that the Chiefs have. And he's not particularly the strongest in between the tackles. So having a guy who runs as fierce and as hard up the middle that Pacheco does, I think it's a compliment. And when they want to get Pacheco touches, they don't have to take Gibbs off the field. They'll be able to just flex him out into another receiver role. And just imagine Mahomes playing with either a current day McCaffrey or Kamara. It's basically the same idea. It's like, you would hate that, so just get a younger, cheaper version. Pacheco could be your actual main running back Gibbs comes in, takes a couple handoffs on the outside, maybe a counter or two. But whenever you're ready to give Pacheco more touches, up if you want to run up the middle, or even Pacheco showed that he could run outside, you just flex him out to receiver and then get him going as a receiver. I'm sure Mahomes could work good magic with him. He worked well with Bryce Young at Alabama, obviously. So it was just an offensive weapon, different than like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, where they drafted him because they had a glaring need at running back, and like, oh, we're just going to be extra super powerful now because we're adding riches on riches. They have a needed wide receiver. This fills both a needed wide receiver and bolstering the running back room and giving Mahomes some much needed weaponry. So they're just probably, I think they should just roll with the tackle duo they have right now. It's Lucas Niang, and I forget who the other guy is that's in right. I think it's Andrew Wiley to the left. They have another guy at right tackle. So I think they're going to maybe even roll with them or grab a guy like a Darnell Wright in the second round if they need to trade up for him. Maybe even a Jalen Duncan. That he's going to probably be their second or third round, probably end of the second. I'd see him go to the Chiefs. But having a weapon as like Jahmyr Gibbs is too good to pass up on if you're the Chiefs, especially when it complements Pacheco as much as it does.
All right. And that is your first round mock. What would you do? As a little bonus question, Steelers picked up cornerback in the first round. They have the first pick of the second round. Who do you think is going to go first in day 2? If you had to guess. I
would go like BJ Ojulari, who is like I think my only remaining guy with a first round grade. But I don't think the Steelers really have a need at edge rusher like other teams do. So I feel like they're gonna roll with Highsmith and Watt. They could go that, just get like a 3-way tandem going where they can just keep rotating them in. For the Steelers specifically as well, I think they might have a need at linebacker, so they could go for one at the top of the second round. Nick Herbig is another Wisconsin guy, kind of like TJ Watt, which they could probably try to mold into what they want. They can go a bunch of different ways here. However, I mean, they just trade for wide receiver. It's tough. It's a tough decision here. I think my gut wants to say just go Ojulari and then have them rotate in 3 pass rushers, especially with TJ Watt being hurt recently and Highsmith being due for a new contract. I feel like that'd be the right move. But if not, probably a guy like Noah Sewell or Trenton Simpson to be a linebacker for them in the second level.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, that's the end of it. That was what I would do to mock draft. Stay tuned. I'm going to have another podcast out with a predicted mock draft closer to the draft. Christian, thank you for staying. I know we only have a minute left in the Zoom, so I'm trying to rush through the ending here, but draft content all week heading up into the draft, as well as we're going to be doing XFL power rankings after this weekend heading into the playoffs. Christian's going to be doing the USFL power rankings after week 2. Kyle Sloter now on his way to the Memphis Showboats. That'll be interesting. Or no, New Orleans Breakers. Maybe. I don't know. I saw a thing on Instagram. But other than that, just stay tuned for whatever's coming out next, and see you guys in the next one.